This is a presentation of the Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, also known as WHMIS. Specifically, this WHMIS course deals with WHMIS 2015, which incorporates the new Globally Harmonized System, or GHS, symbols. Whenever you see or hear WHMIS, you can assume we are talking about WHMIS 2015. If we refer to the old WHMIS system, we will call it WHMIS 1988. In this presentation, we will introduce WHMIS and explain what it is. We will introduce the Globally Harmonized System, or GHS, and the basic symbols. We will outline the physical, health, and environmental hazard classes that these GHS symbols fall into. We will show you what to expect on supplier and workplace labels. And finally, we will go through the components of the Safety Data Sheet, or SDS. The Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, or WHMIS, is a comprehensive system for providing health and safety information on hazardous chemical products. Most W.E. Greer cleaning products are reasonably safe when in their diluted states. However, many of our chemicals are packaged as concentrates to be diluted. The concentrates can be harsher when exposed to the skin, eyes, inhaled or ingested. For this reason, many of our cleaning chemicals are WHMIS controlled. WHMIS is comprised of several components, including hazard identification and product classification, supplier and workplace labeling, safety data sheets, and education. So the question is, who is responsible for implementing WHMIS? Is it the manufacturer who makes the product? Is it the employer who runs the business where the chemicals are being used? Is it the employee who uses the chemical? Is it the workplace's health and safety committee? Is it the government? What do you think? Pause here for a little more time to answer the question. If you answered all of these players, then you're right. Suppliers, such as W.E. Greer, are responsible for evaluating the chemicals for safety issues that need to be covered by WHMIS. Suppliers also ensure that proper labels have been placed on the product containers, and safety data sheets are readily available to the customer. In our case, our safety data sheets are available by request or through our website. Employers are responsible for ensuring their staff members are trained and that all containers holding chemicals are properly labeled. They must also ensure safety data sheets are available on-site and are being reviewed by staff for all chemical products being used, and that personal protective equipment is available and suitable for the products. Employees are responsible for actively participating in the training that the employers provide, applying the safety practices and using the controls that are put in place, informing employers of issues such as unreadable labels, reviewing and following safety data sheets and label instructions, asking questions of supervisors when unsure of a situation, and refusing unsafe work. Health and safety committees are comprised of on-site staff at all levels, and together this team discusses, develops, and implements policies and programs concerning safety, including WHMIS. And finally, government, specifically the Labour Branch of Human Resources Development Canada at the federal level, and the Occupational Health and Safety in the province of Alberta, is responsible for enforcing WHMIS. As mentioned before, WHMIS 2015 incorporates the Globally Harmonized System, or GHS. The GHS defines and classifies chemical hazards and provides health and safety information on labels and safety data sheets. The GHS has been adopted by many countries around the world. Canada adopted the GHS on February the 11th, 2015, and the new system is currently in a transition phase which concludes on December 1st, 2018. Currently, we are in Phase 1 of the transition, which affects mainly the manufacturers and distributors of chemicals. By May 31, 2017, all manufacturer packaging and safety data sheets will be WHMIS 2015 compliant. Employers are expected to be completely transitioned over by December 1, 2018. Here is another question for you. What do you think some of the advantages are of adopting an international system such as the GHS? Pause here if you need more time to discuss the answer. The Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety provides this reason. Currently, many different countries have different systems for classification and labeling of chemical products. In addition, several different systems can exist even within the same country. This situation has been expensive for governments to regulate and enforce, costly for companies who have to comply with many different systems, and confusing for workers who need to understand the hazards of a chemical in order to work safely. So, using this explanation, the benefits of the GHS include promoting more efficient regulation of hazard identification, facilitating trade between countries by providing a common hazard identification system, making compliance to hazard identification easier, reducing the cost of compliance, particularly for companies that sell in more than one country, providing better and more consistent information, encouraging safe transport, handling, and use of chemicals, promoting a better emergency response to chemical incidents, and reducing the amount of animal testing, since research can be combined and shared. So what are the new GHS symbols and what do they mean? The new symbols are easily recognized. They have symbols that are somewhat similar to the old WHMIS symbols, with some minor changes, and they are encased in a red diamond border on a white background. There are also several new symbols introduced by the GHS system, including the health hazard, the exploding bomb, and the environmental hazard. The biohazardous symbol from the WHMIS 1988 system is not included in the GHS, so when there is a biohazardous risk, you will see the old WHMIS biohazard symbol on the product label and accompanying materials. Biohazards exist when a chemical product involves microorganisms that pose a risk to human health, or it refers to waste products that may contain dangerous microorganisms. An example of such a substance would be biological waste in a hospital. Here are the basic symbol meanings and precautions. The exploding bomb represents products that may explode if exposed to heat, flame, friction, or shock. The flame represents products that are flammable if exposed to heat, flame, or sparks, or may give off flammable gases in water. It also includes products that are self-heating or self-reacting. The flame over circle represents products that can burn without air or can make a fire worse in already combustible materials. These materials are also called oxidizers. The gas cylinder represents gases that are under pressure. Gas released may also be very cold, and the container the pressurized gas is in may explode if heated. The corrosion symbol represents products that can cause skin corrosion, burns, and eye damage, as well as substances that are corrosive to metals. The skull and crossbones represents acute toxicity, either fatal or toxic. It refers to products that may be life-threatening even in small amounts with short exposure. The health hazard symbol represents products that are respiratory or skin sensitizers, germ cell mutagens, carcinogens, reproductive toxins, organ toxins, and aspiration hazards. The exclamation mark represents products that are skin or eye irritants, respiratory irritants, skin sensitizers, or substances that cause acute toxicity or organ damage. The environment symbol represents products that have aquatic toxicity and may cause long-term effects in the environment. This last symbol is not enforced under WHMIS 2015, but you may see it in relation to products manufactured outside of the country. The meanings behind each symbol will be expanded in more detail when we talk about GHS classes in the next section. Answer this quick question. What does this symbol represent? Make sure to pause if you need additional time. Skin or eye irritants, respiratory irritants, skin sensitizers, or substances that cause acute toxicity or organ damage. How about this symbol? Acute toxicity, either fatal or toxic. How about this symbol? A product or waste that may contain microorganisms that pose a risk to human health. Is the biohazard symbol part of WHMIS 2015? Yes, but it is not part of the Globally Harmonized System, so it uses the WHMIS 1988 style symbol. There are three main hazard groups: physical hazards, which concern chemical reactions such as combustion and explosions; health hazards, which concerns the user's health such as toxicity and irritation; and environmental hazards, which concerns ramifications to our planet such as the depletion of our ozone layer or the pollution of lakes and streams. Each group has several classes that fall within it that are represented by one or more of the symbols that we just reviewed. In conjunction with the symbol, each class has a range of hazard categories, from low risk to extreme high risk, which is communicated through the signal word and the hazard statement that accompanies the symbol or symbols. The signal word may either be danger, to communicate a higher level of threat, or warning, to communicate a lower threat, and the hazard statement will provide more specific information as to what the threat actually is. The GHS system allows for a simple set of symbols and statements to represent a wide variety of chemicals and products with varied levels of hazards. Here is an example of what you might see on a product label. Here you see the flame symbol accompanied by a danger signal word and a highly flammable liquid and vapor hazard statement. This allows us to quickly communicate that the chemical is a Category 2 flammable liquid with a flash point of less than 23 degrees Celsius and an initial boiling point of 35 degrees or higher. You, of course, will not understand the label symbol and statements to this level of detail, but you can quickly deduce that the product is very dangerous and should be kept away from heat sources. So let's discuss each group and their classes. There are 10 physical hazard classes, including explosives, flammable gases, aerosols, liquids and solids, oxidizing gases, liquids and solids, self-reactive substances and mixtures, pyrophoric liquids and solids, self-heating substances and mixtures, organic peroxides, corrosive to metals, gases under pressure, and substances and mixtures which in contact with water emit flammable gases. Explosives, represented by the exploding bomb, includes materials that are both explosive and pyrotechnic, meaning the product may produce light, heat, or smoke. These products may be highly unstable. Even a jolt, a bit of friction, or an increase in temperature may cause the product to react. Keep these products away from heat, flame, and high pressure. And in the case of a fire emergency, stay away from the area where these products are located due to their explosive nature. Flammable gases, aerosols, liquids, and solids refer to products that can burn in air when ignited and include chemically unstable gases that react explosively even in the absence of air or oxygen. These materials may burn at a relatively low temperature. They may catch fire at a lower temperature than combustible materials. They may burst into flame in air, release flammable gas when exposed to water, or they may cause a fire when exposed to heat, sparks, flame, or friction. The precautions are simple. Keep these materials away from heat, flame, and static charges. Oxidizing gases, liquids, and solids includes chemicals that can cause or increase the intensity of a fire. These products may break down into components that supply oxygen to a fire or explosion, or they may cause the combustion of another material more than air. To lower the risk of these chemicals, keep them away from flammable and combustible materials. Self-reactive substances and mixtures represent products that are unstable, can decompose rapidly upon heating, and may cause a fire or explosion. These products may detonate or be easily ignited by another heat source. They may have explosive properties, or they may undergo a strong exothermic decomposition, meaning it generates a lot of heat when it breaks down, even without the aid of air or oxygen. As a precaution, you should keep these materials away from flammable and combustible materials. Pyrophoric liquids and solids are a class of chemicals that can readily ignite when exposed to air or oxygen. Precautions you should take with pyrophoric liquids and solids include to limit the amount of these products you keep on hand, store them under recommended conditions, and avoid heat, flames, and products that produce oxygen. Self-heating substances and mixtures include chemicals that may decompose slowly and become hot when exposed to air. The difference between this class and other similar classes is the length of time that the reaction takes. These chemicals produce heat at a slower rate, but pose a danger because over time they may heat to a point of ignition or combustion. To guard against issues with these products, store them under their recommended conditions, limit the amount kept on hand and how much you are working with, keep the materials away from light, sources of heat, moisture, and other flammable and combustible materials, and work in an environment that will not react readily if the substance becomes unstable. Organic peroxides include chemicals that are unstable, highly reactive, or explosive, as well as any organic compound with two oxygen atoms joined together, such as hydrogen peroxide. These products may be easily combustible, they may decompose and give off heat at an increasing rate, they may give off flammable vapors, and they may be toxic or corrosive. To avoid issues, keep these materials away from flammable and combustible materials, keep them out of sunlight and heat, keep them away from acids and bases, store them in the recommended conditions, and work with peroxides in a well-ventilated area. Corrosive to metals includes chemicals that can damage or destroy metals. These products may also give off a gas during corrosion, which may be flammable. Precautions include keeping the product away from metals, using the product in a well-ventilated area, avoiding contact with corrosive materials, and using corrosion-resistant equipment. Gases under pressure includes chemicals that contain compressed, liquefied, dissolved, or refrigerated liquefied gases. These products may explode if they are heated, or may release a gas that is very cold. Precautions include keeping the product away from heat sources and avoid contact with skin and eyes. Our final physical class is substances and mixtures which emit flammable gas when contacting water. These materials will react with water to produce a gas that is flammable or spontaneously explosive, or the substance itself may be flammable when it contacts water. Precautions include storing the chemical under recommended conditions, protecting it from sources of moisture, and using it in a safe and dry environment with precautionary measures. Our next group of classes fall under health hazards, which, as it sounds, are classes of chemicals that have a health impact on users. These classes include acute toxicity, skin corrosion or irritation, serious eye damage or eye irritation, respiratory sensitivity, germ cell mutagenicity, carcinogenicity, reproductive toxicity, specific target organ toxicity in a single exposure, specific target organ toxicity in a repeated exposure, and aspiration hazard. These health hazard classes deal with exposure to materials through inhalation, contact of skin or eyes, ingestion or injection. Acute toxicity involves chemicals that cause toxic effects, including serious toxic effects leading to symptoms such as headaches, nausea, respiratory problems, pain, and even death. These chemicals may be toxic after a single exposure, after repeated exposures, or after a prolonged exposure such as several hours of inhalation. To avoid being affected by these substances, people should handle substances with extreme caution, use protective equipment and clothing, wash after using the material, and work with the material in a well-ventilated area with suitable respiratory equipment. Skin corrosion or irritation represents chemicals that cause skin damage, ranging in severity from mild irritation to severe skin burns. These chemicals may have long-term effects with repeated contact. To avoid irritation and corrosion, make sure to use these products with protective equipment and clothing, and wash after using. The serious eye damage or eye irritation class deals with materials that affect the eyes and range in seriousness from simple irritation to severe damage. These materials may have long-term effects with repeated contact, which may or may not be reversible. Again, guard against exposure to these materials with proper protective equipment and clothing, and wash after using the product. Respiratory sensitization refers to chemicals that can cause asthma or respiratory hypersensitivity. Either immediately or over time, a person may develop coughing, wheezing, shortness of breath, or may experience a constriction of the airways. Occupational asthma is said to occur when symptoms of asthma appear when a product is used. Products that incite occupational asthma are called asthmagens. To avoid issues, use these products in well-ventilated areas with personal protective equipment for breathing. Follow the SDS recommendation for the type of breathing apparatus required. Skin sensitization refers to chemicals that cause allergic skin reactions following skin contact. This may appear as redness, rashes, itching, swelling, or blisters at the contact point or elsewhere. To prevent skin sensitization, make sure to use protective equipment such as gloves, wash your hands after using the product, and wash or discard protective clothing after use so contaminated clothing does not come into contact with skin. Germ cell mutagenicity refers to chemicals that cause damage to DNA in the reproductive cells of humans, which could then be passed on to the child, possibly resulting in birth defects. Precautions for these chemicals include using these products in well-ventilated areas, using them with personal protective equipment, and washing after using them. Carcinogenicity refers to chemicals that cause an increased risk of cancer. Precautions for these chemicals include using these products in well-ventilated areas, using them with personal protective equipment, and washing after using them. Reproductive toxicity refers to chemicals that can cause reduced sexual function and fertility and create adverse effects in offspring. Symptoms include altered sexual behavior, menstrual or lactational problems, infertility, and embryo issues or death. Precautions for these chemicals include using the products in well-ventilated areas, using them with personal protective equipment, and washing after using them. Specific target organ toxicity refers to chemicals that can cause non-lethal toxic effects on an organ system. Damage may occur to a specific organ, including the lungs, liver, kidneys, nervous system, skin, blood, eyes, and reproductive organs, and the effects may be reversible or irreversible. Effects may occur after a single exposure or may require multiple exposures to take effect. Precautions include using these products in well-ventilated areas, using personal protective equipment, and washing after their use. The final health hazard class is Aspiration Hazard. This class refers to materials that enter the lungs and cause serious toxic effects including chemical pneumonia, pulmonary injury and death, or less serious symptoms such as headaches, nausea, dizziness, drowsiness, incoordination, and confusion. A person may also experience aspiration if they are vomiting a chemical, since some of the chemical may find its way into the lungs. This is why vomiting is not recommended as a first aid measure for ingested chemicals. Precautions for these chemicals include using these products in well-ventilated areas, using them with personal protective equipment, and washing after using them. The final group of classes belong to environmental hazards, which affect our environment, including the aquatic environment and the ozone layer. Hazardous to the aquatic environment involves chemicals that are toxic or harmful to aquatic organisms. They may damage water systems or injure or kill animals or plant life. As with human health, there are two toxicity types: acute or short-term exposure effects, or chronic, which is long-term exposure effects. To guard against damaging the aquatic environment, dispose of chemicals and the container as instructed on the safety data sheet or label. Hazardous to the ozone layer includes chemicals such as chlorofluorocarbons or CFCs that damage the ozone layer. As a precaution, where possible, avoid these products and dispose of chemicals and chemical containers as per the recommendation of the safety data sheet or label. It is important to note that you are not expected to know these classes and precautions by heart. Simply be familiar with the general meanings of the symbols and know where to get the additional information when required. This leads us to the next sections of this presentation: labels and safety data sheets. Answer the following questions. Pause if you need more time. As you have now heard, there are three main hazard groups. What are they? Physical, health, and environmental. What group do these symbols belong to? These symbols belong to the health group. If a chemical falls into the respiratory sensitization class, what kind of symptoms could a person experience? Coughing, wheezing, shortness of breath, and constriction of the airways. There are two types of WHMIS labels: product labels and workplace labels. Product labels are found on the original chemical packaging and are placed there by the supplier. Workplace labels are made by the final user of the product when the chemical needs to be decanted to a secondary bottle. The GHS product label replaces the traditional WHMIS panel on the product labels. Under WHMIS 2015 requirements, the panel must be in both English and French. The new panel differs from the WHMIS 1988 panel in that it no longer requires a dotted border, but the symbols must be in a red diamond and on a white background. There are 6 parts to a supplier WHMIS label. The product identifier is the brand name, chemical name, generic name, or trade name of the product. Note that the name placed here must match the safety data sheet. Then we have the GHS hazard symbol or symbols, the signal word, which alerts the person to a potential hazard and indicates the severity of the hazard. As mentioned before, there are only 2 possible words: danger, which refers to more severe hazards, and warning, which refers to less severe hazards. The hazard statement or statements are standardized descriptions of the hazards. Within each physical, health, and environmental class, there are a series of categories that range in severity. Each category has an assigned hazard statement. Some examples of hazard statements include extremely flammable gas, contains gas under pressure, may explode if heated, fatal if inhaled, causes eye irritation, or may cause cancer. The precautionary statements are standardized descriptions of measures that will minimize or prevent the adverse effects of the product. There are 5 types of precautionary statements. General, for example, keep container tightly closed. Prevention, for example, wear gloves. Response, including first aid, for example, seek medical attention. Storage, for example, protect from sunlight. And disposal, for example, bring to a waste disposal center. This section may also include some supplemental information the supplier feels must be communicated. Any information in this section must not contradict the formal precautionary statements. Information might include details of ingredients with unknown toxicity, additional precautionary actions, additional hazards, the physical state of the product, or the route of exposure. The last item on the GHS panel of a supplier label is the initial supplier identifier, which includes the name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer or importer. Quick question. What are 2 possible signal words? Pause if you need more time to answer the question. Warning for less serious effects, and danger for more serious effects. Workplace labels are less formal and not intended as complete information. If a person is using the product for the first time, he or she must read the safety data sheet and supplier label first. Workplace labels include only a few basic pieces of information, including the product name, the safe handling precautions, and important label information, as well as reference to the safety data sheet. It is the responsibility of the employer to ensure that the workplace labels are being used, and the responsibility of the employees to read the label. Workers should never use products that are not clearly identified. A secondary bottle should always have a workplace label applied unless the worker pours the product for immediate use. But you are just using cleaning chemicals. Is it really necessary to take such precautions? Indeed it is. Cleaning chemicals can react badly together. For example, bleach and ammonia produce a potentially deadly chlorine gas when mixed. These two products look similar in appearance and can be confused easily unless they are in clearly marked bottles. Question: is it all right to handwrite a workplace label? Pause if you need more time to answer. Yes, a handwritten workplace label is fine, as long as it has the correct product name, safety precautions, and reference to the safety data sheet. Labels provide only the most important information for immediate use. Before using a chemical for the first time, the safety data sheet needs to be read. What is a safety data sheet? It is a summary document that provides information about a product, including how to use the product safely, what to expect if the recommendations are not followed, how to recognize symptoms of exposure, and what to do if emergencies occur. Under the new GHS format, safety data sheets no longer expire unless there is a change to the product. As mentioned before, a safety data sheet should be read thoroughly before using a chemical for the first time. But it should also be consulted after an extended period of time has passed without using the product as a refresher. SDSs should remain readily available so that they can be consulted when there is any uncertainty about products and when specific information is required on first aid, personal protective equipment, handling and storage, or disposal. Safety data sheets following the GHS format have the same headers in the same position all the time, making it easy and quick to locate the information you need. These are the sections of the safety data sheet: identification, hazard identification, composition or information on ingredients, first aid measures, firefighting measures, accidental release measures, handling and storage, exposure controls or personal protection, physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity, toxicological information, ecological information, disposal considerations, transport information, regulatory information, and other information. Section 1, the identification portion of an SDS, includes the product identifier or name of the product, other identifiers, which are any additional names the product goes under, the recommended use of the product, any restrictions the product has, the supplier identification, including name, address, and phone number, and emergency contact information. Section 2, hazards identification, includes the classification or a description of the product's hazards. It also includes the GHS panel information found on the product label, including the symbols, the signal word, the hazard statement or statements, and the precautionary statement or statements. Section 3, composition or information on ingredients, includes the ingredient chemical names, the common names, CAS registry numbers or other identifiers, names of impurities, stabilizing solvents or other additives, and the concentrations of each of these chemicals. Section 4, First Aid Measures, includes the route of exposure, whether that is by inhalation, contact, ingestion, or injection, and the most important symptoms and effects, including whether the effects are immediate or delayed. This section also provides information on special treatment for exposure, if it is applicable. Section 5, Firefighting Measures, outlines information on the flash point, flammability and hazards of the product in a fire or explosion emergency, and includes firefighter information such as extinguishing media, and what type of protective equipment they should be using when handling an emergency. Section 6, Accidental Release Measures, includes the personal precautions, protective equipment, emergency procedures, and methods or materials for containing and cleaning up the product. Section 7, Handling and Storage, includes precautions for safe handling, conditions for safe storage, and information on any incompatible materials you will want to avoid. Section 8, Exposure Controls or Personal Protection, includes the exposure guidelines and limits, along with the testing sources, any ways to eliminate or reduce exposure using substitutions or equipment, also known as engineering controls, and recommended personal protective equipment for various routes of exposure, such as the eyes, skin, and respiratory system. Section 9, Physical and Chemical Properties, can include a wide variety of descriptive information on the product. These descriptive properties can help you to understand what to expect when the chemical is used in various situations. For example, if a highly flammable product has a high evaporation rate, you will need to ensure you have enough ventilation when using the product to avoid a buildup of flammable gas. Section 10, Stability and Reactivity, includes information on how stable the product is with factors such as heat, cold, other chemicals, and what dangerous products could be produced if the product does react. Section 11, Toxicological Information, includes a description of the toxic health effects of the product and the research information used to make these conclusions. The information will include routes of exposure, symptoms of exposure, the effects of the product, both acute and chronic, and the amount of exposure required for these effects. Section 12, Ecological Information, includes descriptive information on how the product behaves in the environment, including its ecotoxicity, its persistence and degradability, its bioaccumulative potential, its mobility in soil, and any other adverse effects. Section 13, Disposal Considerations, includes information on the safe handling of the product for disposal and the methods used for that disposal, for both the chemical and the packaging. Section 14, Transport Information, includes information such as the UN number, UN name, transport hazard class or classes, the packing group, environmental hazards, transport in bulk, and any other special precautions used for when the product is being transported. Section 15, Regulatory Information, includes the safety, health, and environmental regulations that pertain to the product. And Section 16, Other Information, will include the date of the latest revision of the safety data sheet, limitations of the safety data sheet, and any other legal information required. Together, these sections provide detailed safety information on a chemical product. If you are unsure of any of the information, make sure to escalate your questions to your employer. In turn, the supplier can be consulted to help with the information. Here are a couple of questions for you. Pause if you need more time to answer. Of this list of safety data sheet sections, where do you think you will find the information on how to clean up an accidental spill? Section 6, Accidental Release Measures. Which section should you refer to if somebody has splashed some of the product in their eyes? Section 4, First Aid Measures. Which section should you refer to if you want to safely dispose of a chemical bottle? Section 13, Disposal Considerations. Which section should you refer to if you need to know the evaporation rate of a product? Section 9. Physical and Chemical Properties. Which section should you refer to if you need to know when the SDS was issued? Section 16. Other Information. Throughout this presentation, you have learned about the new WHMIS 2015 program, about the globally harmonized system that is incorporated into the new WHMIS, the symbols associated with it, and the information that appears on the labels and safety data sheets.